Hello, my dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Europa Rediviva. Today, I'd like to discuss about the practical consequences of the lack of sovereignty in Romania. In the previous episodes, I've detailed how this came to be, how this situation came about, that Romanians, even though nominally they live in an independent state, in practice, this is a state that lacks sovereignty, and this is not exactly something that is talked about. So it's a widespread problem. It has serious consequences, but a feature of a state like Romania that has no sovereignty is that also its intellectual environment and also its media space is confiscated by this network of foreign agents. And as a consequence of this, all sorts of other problems are addressed, or pseudo problems, but the problem of sovereignty is not only marginalized but frowned upon. So everybody who brings up the problem of the lack of sovereignty is immediately labeled as a foreign agent, is immediately labeled as a Russian agent, as a Russian disinformation agent, Putin puppet, and so on and so forth. So we have a country that is turned inside out. The network of foreign agents runs it to the benefit of foreign interests. And whoever brings up the situation, the lame situation in which the population is essentially treated like livestock to be milked in favor of foreign interests, is automatically labeled as a Russian propagandist because these are Russian talking points apparently. I wonder if it's the same situation in the Sahel. If you live in Burkina Faso and you point out the fact that France is exploiting your natural resources and your population through the means of some junta, some military junta, if you're also labeled a Russian propagandist because these are Russian talking points. Or in Congo, if you point out that the children of Congo should not be doing mining activities at 12 or 13, but they should be in school and there should be a school infrastructure for them and so on. If you point that out in Congo, you're also labeled a Russian disinformator because those are narratives that favor the Kremlin point of view, and we should only disseminate narratives that favor France. But I suppose not. I suppose the treachery and the cowardice in African societies are not so widespread as in Romania. In the case of Romania, things go so far as to have out in the open all sorts of initiatives which go completely against public interest and which should be completely illegal in any other country, also in sub-Saharan Africa. But for some reason in Romania they fly under the radar, there are no objections to them. I've mentioned the hit list and the paramilitary brigade that functions at the behest of Ukraine in Romania and that tries to silence any kind of dissenting voices from the narrative that Romania should be used by Ukraine and that Romania's interests are the same as Ukraine's interests and so on. So essentially, if you say such a thing, if you say that Romania should pursue its own interests and that being sacrificed for the sake of Ukraine is not exactly in the national interest of Romania, you get very quickly labeled, put on the blacklist, and intimidated in all kinds of ways, threatened, and this is something that the Romanian state not only tolerates but actually supports, and it gives these people platforms and in public media, in public state media. It gives them awards, it gives them airtime, it brings them in universities to talk to students, to indoctrinate the students, and so on and so forth. So this is definitely an example of an initiative that goes contrary to even the theoretical notion of national interest, let alone the practicalities of what is the national interest of Romania today. And yet it is run by people who are connected with the state, and it is tolerated and encouraged by the state, by the current regime. Today in the news I saw the fact that the new government that might be instated has taken up as a priority, as a strategic priority for Romania, the building of small modular reactors. This is an experimental nuclear technology that is pioneered by an American corporation that tries to repurpose nuclear submarine engines. And it's never been tried anywhere. Not only has it not been proven successful, it is far from being proven successful because the operating costs are too high with respect to the price of the energy output. So therefore they are surely non-competitive. But this does not prohibit the Romanian state to pump hundreds of millions of dollars into this joint project. Instead of developing Romania's energy infrastructure, it is pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into this American company, and it is using its own population as lab rats. It is using its own population for this experimental nuclear technology to see if it is safe or not. So this was never done anywhere. You can imagine the United States has many vassals around the world. There are maybe more than 100 countries that are in the system of the United States. And yet none of them was slavish enough to volunteer its population to be experimented upon with a nuclear technology that has no safety record. It will be pioneered experimentally for the first time in Romania. It hasn't even been tried in the United States. But these comprador elites, for example, the energy minister that had this initiative is a former high school colleague of mine. We were in the same year. Because his father was a prominent banker, he went on to study at Stanford, and I assume that he was recruited subsequently by the American intelligence services, because when he came to be Romania's energy minister, he partnered the Romanian state with this American corporation and put Romania's population on the line to be experimented upon with this new experimental nuclear technology concept. And out of all the countries in this world, including those in the third world, no other country was willing to be the lab rat for this nuclear experiment, but Romania apparently was. And not only did this technology go nowhere, but because of the slavishness of the Romanian elites towards the United States, they decided to continue it and to even make it a national priority. So the new government that will be instated at the behest of the Romanian president and of some elements from the parliamentary parties, they have taken up this concept of small modular reactors at the behest of their American patrons to be of national strategic importance. Another example, the vaccine procurement program. I've spoken a lot about it. During COVID, the Romanian authorities, in cahoots with the European Commission, purchased 10 times the number of vaccines than Romania had eligible population. And then it proceeded to do this demonization campaign and this public exclusion campaign and this segregation campaign, like apartheid, in order to force people to have as many doses as possible. And the whole public health concept was delegitimized. All sorts of people who did not have the proper education and did not have the proper qualifications were pushed forward to tout these vaccines. For example, the head of the Vaccine Products Authority in Romania was named this Swedish dentist who was a member of the Save Romania party. So this is what qualified her to be the head specialist for vaccine products during the pandemic. And she was completely scientifically illiterate, because I had back and forth conversations with her. I tried to explain to her different things that appeared in the scientific literature. She was completely unable even to read basic graphs, let alone statistics. Let alone the statistics that were implied in those scientific papers. But still, she was the expert on pushing these vaccines. She was doing, on behalf of this agency, so paid with public money, she was doing these campaigns that you don't grow a tail if you take the vaccines, or you'll not have scales on your skin if you take vaccines. So addressing all sorts of non-problems and refusing to address the real problems like myocarditis, like thrombocytopenia associated with cerebral vein thrombosis, and all sorts of other problems that were occasioned by this experimental vaccine. That was experimental not only because it was a newly debuted product, but also because it was done with a technology that had never ever, even though it was studied for 30 years, it had never ever been injected into humans until the clinical trials for COVID. Another example, the current president of Romania used to be a mayor of Bucharest through unfortunate circumstances. And in this capacity, he proceeded to liquidate the municipal companies. The previous social democratic administration had built a number of municipal companies to handle all sorts of services that would have been outsourced otherwise. And the social democratic administration decided to do them in-house. And at the behest of the US Embassy, together with the US ambassador of the time, the mayor-to-be announced that municipal companies, that public utilities in general are something corrupt, that they are something socialist, and socialism is the red plague. And as our forefathers taught us, our forefathers from the 1940s in Germany taught us, we should do everything to defeat the red plague. So therefore, therefore Bucharest should have no public utilities. Bucharest had already privatized the water supply in the 2000s to a French corporation, and it is still privatized to that French corporation to this day, to Veolia. And any discussion of nationalizing it makes you be labeled as an anti-European. Because, of course, you can imagine that in France, in Paris, they drink water from the tap that is owned by BlackRock, right? Or by some American corporation. This is the European way that these people regard. If you privatize everything, including the air and the water and the soil, this is when you become truly European in the minds of these illiterates that were recruited to be the network of foreign agents and to create this discourse. So in Romania, if you talk about privatization, this is the pro-European stance, even though in Western European countries where I have resided and where I currently reside and where I will also reside in the future, in these countries, public utilities are publicly owned, not privately owned by some corporation. But in Romania, if you say that utilities should be publicly owned, you are immediately labeled Putinist, communist, fascist. Communist, not so much. Communist maybe 10 years ago. Now fascist, because of course the fascists want nationalizations because they are patriots, and we know what nationalism does. So better privatize everything. So the mayor of Bucharest, the current president of Romania and the previous mayor of Bucharest, among many other things that he did, which were against public interest, liquidated the municipal companies that were, of course, providing these services at lower cost than they would have been otherwise outsourced to the private market. And they had to go because the US Embassy said so. This is what happens when you lack sovereignty. You do not have a say in absolutely anything. I have no idea, for example, if in Romania right now there are some covert medical experiments being done. But it would not surprise me because Tulsi Gabbard, the head of the National Intelligence Community, I think it's called in the United States, admitted a few days ago that the United States runs a network of hundreds of biolaboratories experimenting and trying to manufacture biological weapons, and it is carrying out these activities in satellite countries, so not on the territory of the United States, in places like Ukraine. So this Russian narrative turned out to be true with the biolaboratories that were studying on typhus and Ebola and HIV and all of these things, how to adapt these pathogens to the Russian DNA, how to create biological weapons against the Eastern Slavic population. This came to be admitted officially by the United States. And well, if Ukraine, after 2014, when it was taken over by the CIA, was allowing these kinds of activities that were creating a biological hazard to its own population, so to have biological research facilities handling gain of function research with dangerous pathogens, it would not surprise me if such things were taking place in Romania, having the Romanian population as test subjects. It would not surprise me, because this is what happens when you have zero sovereignty, and when the people you elect to represent you just sell you out for all kinds of interests of their foreign paymasters. But the issue of sovereignty cannot be discussed because it is a Putinist talking point, apparently. Another practical consequence of the lack of sovereignty in Romania, if you open these discussions, as I said previously, you get labeled, and there's this information operation conducted against people who speak up, trying to not only to publicly shame them, but also to instigate the people around them to marginalize them, to despise them, to accuse them, to so on. And this information operation carried out by the network of foreign agents goes on smoothly, very, very smoothly. Ever since the pandemic, ever since I did not want to take the vaccines, I was marginalized, shunned, accused, and labeled in all sorts of ways by essentially the majority of my friends of that period that I had accumulated throughout my lifetime. So my friends up to that point, and quite a number of people from my family. Because of the success of the information operations that said that whoever questions the vaccine is a Putin puppet, because Putin has the interest to make as many Romanians sick and die, and it is the agents of Putin who spread vaccine misinformation. This was the narrative then. It caught on, it catches on in these pseudo-educated circles, where I used to be a part as well. And this is what happens when you try to bring in sanity into the discourse, when you try to bring in logic, when you try to question the stupidity of the official narrative, and so on and so forth. And of course, things did not improve with the advent of the Ukraine war. A couple of weeks ago, there was this maritime drone incident in the port of Constanța that I've spoken about in a previous video. And it was a setup done by Ukraine. The drone was Ukrainian. It blew up 50 meters from the oil depot, and the explosion of the oil terminal would have triggered also the explosion of the warehouse full of nitrogen ammonia. So this would have been an explosion that would have wiped out maybe tens of thousands of Romanians living in Constanța and would have destroyed the city. And the only thing that prevented this tragedy from occurring was the fact that the propeller of the maritime drone had stuck itself in some netting, and it could not free itself. And even though the Ukrainians tried for several hours after the drone was discovered, they tried and could not free their drone, so they blew it up. But even after the Romanians discovered it, they could have easily, because they did not respond to attempts of contacting them, so they could have always still had plausible deniability. The Romanian dock workers found this drone at 6 a.m. They filmed it, they reported it. The Ukrainians never picked up the phone, they never acknowledged it until 11 when they said that it's gonna blow up in 3 minutes. And in those 5 hours, the Ukrainians kept on trying to move that drone to free it from the netting where it got caught, and to send it further to the oil depot so that they would blow it up, because they still had plausible deniability in the fact that they could have always said, because they had not acknowledged the drone in due time, they could have always said, it was a Russian drone trying to mimic ours. And look what they did. They blew up the city of Constanța. So now you are at war. You have to join our fights, and you have to do mobilization and to send people to our front lines, because now we're in the same boat. This is what would have happened. And well, another thing that another practical consequence of Romania's lack of sovereignty, the economic, political, media landscape is curated by the foreign patrons, by the Americans in principle, through the means of lawfare. I've spoken about lawfare before. It's this technique through which, whenever a politician refuses to obey the orders coming from Washington, they activate the system that they built inside Romania's judiciary and inside the prosecutor's office, and those political targets start having criminal investigations against them. The only thing that is sufficient for them to arrive in this situation is to be designated a target. From that point onwards, there is no criminal deeds that they should have done up to that point. There is no mistake that they needed to do, because quite a number of prominent Romanian politicians were convicted on completely bogus, absolutely false and ridiculous charges that would not have stood up in any court of law of any normal country. Absolutely ridiculous charges. Also something that is now in the Romanian news. The former prince, well, grandson of Romania's second to last king, is being extradited from France because he was convicted in this trial in which he was accused of demanding some things that had belonged to his grandfather using a non-final legal decision that he was the grandfather of his that he was the grandson of his grandfather. It's a completely ridiculous case, completely ridiculous. He was well within his rights to claim what was his grandfather's, and it was not his mistake that the Romanian authorities of the Restitution Commission gave those things to him, even if he wouldn't deserve them, but he does. I mean, if you follow civil law, then he was the grandson of his grandfather, and those things belonged to his grandfather. So that's it. It's a very simple case. But even if you admit that perhaps he was not entitled to them, the only thing he did was to apply, and he did not use any fake documents. He just stated his identity, and he demanded those things that had belonged to his grandfather. So even if it was a fraudulent restitution, he wouldn't be guilty for it because he was not the one doing the restitution. But still, I mean, the lawfare operations are so ridiculous, and people go to jail in Romania for such ridiculous cases, that this is a very strong instrument in the hands of whoever pilots the judicial system. And well, in the case of Romania, it is the Americans. If the Americans want a pro-American government, it's very easy to essentially start criminal procedures against anybody who doesn't want to do the will of the Americans. And then, even though that person might down the line be found innocent, they still have to exit politics in the meantime. So that's a very easy way of just kicking out political targets, convenient political targets, and of ensuring that whoever runs Romania is at the disposal of these foreign interests. And there are, of course, very many examples I could give of the practical consequences of the lack of sovereignty, because people in Romania, when they hear the sovereignist discourse, a majority of them have the tendency to think that it's about being members of the European Union or of NATO or I don't know what other international organisms. And it's not. It's something completely different. There are many countries that are members of these international organizations, and they have a higher degree of sovereignty than we do. I don't know of any other country that's a member of the European Union and of the United States that took out its national history from some profiles, from the curriculum of some class profiles, the scientific track of the Romanian high school curriculum, to replace it with the history of the Jews. I don't know any other country. We're all in NATO, we're all in the European Union. I know no other country that took out the history of its own people, the national history of, in this case, the Romanians, to replace it with the history of the Jewish people. This is definitely something that does not come from being a member of these organizations. The lack of sovereignty in Romania comes from this exercising cowardice and in treachery of the Romanian elites, and of the fact that the majority of the population is sleeping. Therefore, the anthem, "Wake up, O Romanian, from thy slumber of death." So given the fact that the majority of the population sees nothing weird about the fact that their children go to school to study this mandatory subject called History of the Jews, and they only have 1 hour of history per week, and this mandatory hour cannibalized the history of the Romanians. If the majority of the population puts up with this and doesn't see a problem in it, this is something very particular, because the Bulgarians would see a problem in it, the Hungarians would see a problem with it, the Ukrainians would see a problem with it, the Serbs, everybody, the Germans, even the Germans would see a problem in it, the Italians. I cannot think of any other country that is a member of both NATO and the European Union that would allow such a thing to happen. And of course, I can speak for hours about such examples where national sovereignty is essential, and it is being trampled upon by this network of foreign agents running the country in the slumber of the majority of the population, in the complete ignorance of the majority of the people. And it is even more surprising the fact that even though these problems are perhaps the last example I can give before I finish the video, the most striking one is the fact that people put up with the low quality of the public services and the slow privatization of them, both in terms of education and in terms of healthcare, instead of being more adamant in demanding that the tax proceeds in the coffers of the government be allocated to the increase of the quality of these public services. These public services are slowly being dismantled through allocations of lower and lower percentages of GDP every year in every budget. And this is why in the majority of the country, the health services that can be provided are very basic, and hospitals from mid-sized cities and towns function more like hospices rather than hospitals. So they provide shelter rather than provide adequate care. And of course, the school network is being downsized, rural schools get closed down, and so on. So the quality and the availability of these public services, these essential public services of schooling and healthcare, are diminishing. And the funding that the state collects through taxes are reallocated for all sorts of procurement programs to favor the international corporations that support the politicians and that support the journalists and the network of foreign agents. So you buy all sorts of weapons that, you only need if you want to enter the war logic and to reignite Operation Barbarossa, so to do Operation Barbarossa once again, tanks and all sorts of things, instead of providing for the welfare of your citizens, to increase public welfare in general, to increase the availability and the quality of the public services. And the majority of the population puts up with this because as soon as somebody brings up the problem that the public money should be invested in the public good, so to increase the welfare of the population, there's this network of so-called public intellectuals that are sponsored by the foreign embassies and all of these grants that immediately label you, fascist. There's an alleged network of left-wing intellectuals. They are left-wing in the fact that they take attitude and they protest against any kind of invocation of the national interest. Whenever a party or a political candidate invokes the national interest, they immediately stand up and shout fascist. They immediately label that politician to be a fascist, and they organize marches that they are against fascism. They taking their orders from the U.S. Embassy and supporting all of the U.S. Causes around the world. There is no U.S. war that they do not support, and yet they pretend to be left-wing because they are LGBT friendly or something like this, or have all sorts of sexual quirks, and this is what they think makes them left-wing. So this is the sad state of affairs, and this is why sovereignty is important, because most Romanians are under this impression that it doesn't really matter who makes the decisions. It doesn't really matter if the people making the decisions are making them to the benefit of their foreign patrons rather than in the interest of the local population. But I'm afraid that this is a process of erosion that can only lead up to the end state in which the Romanian population will be sacrificed physically. If you do not put up with aggression and if you do not put up with being exploited, you just encourage the perpetrator to exploit you even more and even more and even more. And the livestock that is now being milked might be sent to the slaughterhouse in the future. I don't know, if there is no opposition and if any kind of contrarian discourse is painted as and is labeled as treacherous and as Russian propaganda, then I'm afraid that the end state can only be one. So this Ukrainian false flag attack did not succeed 2 weeks ago, but maybe the next one will. And Romania will be put in the state of war as a consequence of this psychogenic event that will render any kind of social dialogue impossible. Any kind of opposition speech will automatically not only label you as a Russian agent, but it will also send you to the gulag, to the political camp, the political internment camp, because you are a threat to the public order. This is how things will be considered. So this is what I wanted to ramble about today. If you like what I do, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to support me financially, you'll find a link in the description of the channel how to do so. Until next time, take care.